Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Hafenfjorling Broadcasting Company. We are here live today at day 2 of the TIMUS Summit.
What's going on, everybody? Forgive my drowsiness. I didn't sleep last night very well. I also had a panic attack because Thomas wasn't online when I wanted him to be online. So
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm still in that phase of waking up. So forgive my lucidness for a good little bit. So what's going on, everybody? Forgive my drowsiness. Thomas, we can't. There's an echo coming through. Hold on.
Yep, fixed it.
Okay. So today we're just going to discuss sorry, give me just a second. We're going to discuss the importance of uniqueness in the micronational community, at least from my perspective of what is important to a micronation, what makes a micronation unique. But of course, I just wanted to give it a start with that. The reason that I wanted to give this talk is because not many micronationalists in the newer generation of micronationalists tend to avoid uniqueness. So, for example, they are usually many micronationalists charge blind head and first to making a micronation. Usually it's just a Twitter page, a Discord server, or whatever. And that's what I wanted to discuss, is how to make it better than just a Discord server and a Twitter account. As for the summit, I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out to the day 2 portion of the summit, and I just want to thank everyone for a very successful day 1. We had, I think, 10, 15 people in total in both sessions combined, which is very good. So, yeah, Thomas, would you like to say anything before I get started, or does anyone have any questions?
I've got nothing to say at the moment. Just as was mentioned yesterday, if you're talking, keep it clean.
Oh yeah, keep it clean. Watch what you're saying. You don't want to. Let's just avoid anything that'll get you, in trouble. Remember, we're live, so anything that you say is broadcast in the community. We can't undo it. So if you say something messed up, we can't fix that for you. So you're on your own. So yeah, just a last little second to give everyone a chance to check it out or join the VC or ask any questions. Alright, well, without further ado then, so I guess we should start with what is micronational uniqueness. In my perspective, and there could be many different perspectives on this, micronational uniqueness starts at 3 different levels, and that would be cultural identity, it would be ideological identity, and then it would be diplomatic identity. And I'm just going to go over those 3 bases for unique identity, starting with cultural uniqueness. Many micronations seem to, when they're first formed, at least by the younger generations, seem to focus on more of, well, we want to be like Molossia, or we want to be like Sealand, or we want to be like, all these other nations that don't necessarily have, they have a unique culture, but from the younger micronationalist perspective, the culture is non-existent, it's not important, so they toss it aside, and then it's just a skeleton of what a nation should be. And one of the major parts of building a state is having a culture, a unique culture to build yourself upon. So, using Adonia as an example, Adonia has 3 cultural bases. As mentioned in the presentation yesterday, starting with Ukrainian culture, I have great-grandparents who are Ukrainian. They migrated from Ukraine sometime during the Russian Civil War. I have Polish grandparents. They came from Poland. To be real, I'm not entirely sure on the Polish side of my family. And then locally in my area, we have German ancestry, so Adonia has taken on the local outlook of culture as well. Now, of course, having 3 cultural bases isn't you should go upon your culture and your micronation however you want to do it. Like, for example, not every micronation is Ukrainian, Polish, and German. If I can use Haraf as an example pretty quickly here. Harafnerfjall uses a lot of pagan, Nordic, Icelandic cultural bases. So many of the ideas, the pronunciations, the titles, the words are in Icelandic, or they're in Nordic. We have bases in pagan scripture. So being able to follow that as a micronationalist is what I think is very important. Having a unique culture is how you establish identity in the first place, and without a culture within your nation is it really isn't a nation. Adonia pre-culture was it was really just politics, and it was just discussion. There was, on my end at least, no attachment to Adonia, because Adonia, at the time, Adonia was just a month old, and then it was 2 months old, and there was no culture to it. And as any social being develops an attachment to something, usually it has to have a unique identity to it in order to be attached to it. Being able to agree to being able to be patriotic towards a identity, you have to have the uniqueness to it. You have to build from the ground up that cultural base. And there are many ways that you could go upon doing it. There's no specific, to be real with you, there's no specific way to lay out a micronation. There's no specific way to lay out a culture in a micronation either. So it all depends on how you go upon it, but to be well researched in what you are adapting and what you are doing is vital to building a micronation in general. Expanding onto ideological uniqueness, to use, again, Adonia as an example, because I can't use many other micronations as an example, because I don't know much about many other micronational politics, unless I actually have an example in a second. But in Adonia, we have Adonian socialism. And Adonian socialism, as defined yesterday, believes that mankind should be the vanguard party of the revolution. They should lead the revolution and establish a sort of Yugoslav economic model with an end goal of the socialist or the communist economic model. Of course, it doesn't have to be oriented left wing. Anyone who has education in political theory and political theory implementation should be able to build upon a unique ideological stance for any micronation. And of course, it comes with, years of developing, years of understanding that you can even build a unique ideological stance. In your nation, the ideological stance that your nation holds is very important to how the nation will function as a whole. Political ideology is the basis of all government, not necessarily restricted to micronational. All political stances derive at the individual himself and the collective itself, and it expands from there to the local and the national government. And it is very important to have a unique ideological stance within your micronation in order to build upon a unique identity, whether it's just your beliefs, which can be unique even if it's what's considered mainstream. Like if I was a Marxist-Leninist, for example, that would be mainstream. Sometimes if you implement your own beliefs, that even if they're mainstream, or maybe they're not as mainstream, they tend to work a lot better, and I consider that unique political identity within micronationalism. In order to work towards building a unique political stance, you have to not only understand both sides of the political spectrum, both left, center, and right. You have to be able to understand the basis of government, you have to understand the basis of the economy, and you have to understand the history behind ideological beliefs. For example, when I formed my first ever micronation, actually no, not my first ever micronation, my second ever micronation, the ISSR, I really have to admit that I didn't understand, first off, what socialism was, and then secondly, I didn't understand the history of socialism and its implementation and the dangers of socialist authoritarianism. Once I found out, I steer clear of the authoritarian socialist stance, and I have always been libertarian socialist for a very long time, probably longer than I've ever known that I was libertarian socialist. And having an understanding in what you believe in and what you want to implement in your nation is very important to be able to do for your micronation. Lastly, I want to cover in unique identity is your diplomatic efforts. There are many micronations that follow the model of DMing everybody. Hey, you want to be my ally? Hey, you want to join my alliance?
Oh dear God.
You want to join the micronational treaty organization? Do you want to join? And people don't understand that these questions are destroying their diplomatic efforts because, for example, the U.S. ambassador to Germany, for example, oh no, some treaty expired, we have to renew it. The U.S. ambassador doesn't go to Germany and doesn't go to the German ambassador of the U.S. and say, hey, you want to be allies again? Like, No, no one does that. No one ever does that. Having a education in diplomacy is very vital, and even if you don't have a education in diplomacy, admittedly, such as myself, being able to properly conduct yourself professionally is key to maintaining diplomacy, and accepting what is a lost cause and what isn't a lost cause is very vital to having a professional diplomatic effort, and being able to stand up for yourself, say, no, I don't think I want relations with this person, or saying that I should avoid this person because having diplomatic relations is a very bad idea, is very important to establishing diplomatic relations in the first place. Many macronational officials, they do not, or they accept what is a lost cause. They are very blunt. It is important to be blunt when you're being diplomatic, and whatever doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Starting drama over it isn't worth it. As someone who used to start fights whenever someone didn't want to be friends with me, I can very, very well tell you that it's not worth the hassle of doing and wasting your time on just drama over a failed alliance or a failed organization or a failed diplomatic effort. Talking behind people's back is not recommended. It's
highly not recommended.
It's how you, as a micronationalist, lose all diplomatic efforts. It's also not recommended to talk about other micronationalists to another micronationalist, because micronationalists have many connections in the community, and they will most likely say something. This community has thrived under the idea that see something, say something. And it can be very helpful, and it can also be very detrimental. So having a good diplomatic base is very vital to building a unique micronation. So, boom, we got all those 3 points out of the way, but you're not done, because implementation is the biggest part of identity building. And my advice to everybody who is listening, everybody who doesn't know where to start, is that you're not going to know. All you do is you go off of what your instinct is. Do I want this in my nation or not? Should I do this or not? Should I implement this or not? And you go off of what you think is best for your nation. However, having those 3 bases is very important, because many nations that are clones mostly do not succeed. They last a month, 6 months, a year at most. Adonia has lasted 2 years based on the ideological, cultural, and diplomatic efforts that we have. So having the 3 bases back you up and being able to, have those develop is very vital to all micronational development. And unique identity is sadly starting to become very hard to find in this community. There are USSR clones, there are German Empire clones, there are I'm gonna form the Nordic Empire. I'm gonna form the Austrian Empire. There's no uniqueness in symbolism, there's no uniqueness in ideological stance, there's no uniqueness in cultural stance, and it falls apart from there. If it doesn't fall apart, I'm very shocked, and it's because you're either role-playing to be a nation that you're not, and you are most likely disrespecting the nation that you are representing as a whole. When you look at the micronational community, there are many tiers of micronationalists, and these micronationalists are either, and I don't mean to be this kind of person for a second, they're either bad, decent, or they're good. Now, I would like to say that there is a even equal mix of these subgroups and these sub-tiers, that it is so diverse in the community that you will find a mix of all three groups. But at the end of the day, one group can ruin it for the other, and then the other group can ruin it for the other, and it's a domino effect that these nations don't seem to actually understand, that the domino effect hurts us as other micronationalists. The stereotypes of Union of Soviet Socialist Republic clones, of German Empire clones, hurts the more unique micronationalists. I had to spend 2 years as a socialist micronation breaking the socialist stereotype. I had to spend 2 years breaking the Marxist-Leninist stereotype. And I had to put all of my efforts on something that shouldn't have had any effort in. And I partially thank the community for it, because Adonia is forever unique, and I can never, ever, ever thank everybody enough for that. But it also can damage newer micronationalists' wishes to be in the community. It can do worse for newer micronationalists who attempt to understand the community. And overall, it can mess over the other micronationalists in the community, just through basic domino effect. So I think I've covered everything. We've covered the three bases. I've covered how it should be implemented, and the problems with non-micronational uniqueness. So I'd like to officially hand off the floor to any questions. I'd like to hand off the floor to any additions to what I said, or any statements that would like to be made.
So what was I going to say? Just as I was going to point out when you mentioned Hafnarfjall, yeah, our primary basis started as Scandinavian with a hint of like UK culture due to mine and Laura's heritages as the two founders, and it's organically changed since then. That's one thing. Many people try to force their cultures too much, and that can cause problems all in its own right, including, as you mentioned, disrespect.
Oh yes. A big problem with representing culture in the community, you have to be really careful on how you display that culture, because if you display it in the incorrect way, or you're not educated enough to express your cultural identity, you begin to fall into problems of ignorance, arrogance, and disrespect of the culture. So you have to be really careful of what you're doing with your cultural identity.
Exactly, and in some cases you can cause great offence by displaying certain cultures incorrectly.
Especially so that you don't have the right to be displaying.
Yeah, she's right. She's completely right. Like, you see so many, and I hate to point it out like this, you see so many Americans develop themselves into the Marxist-Leninist ideology. This is where I specialize. I specialize in left-wing political theory. I specialize in the micronational community's left-wing stances. And a common theme that I've seen is that the Marxist-Leninist part of this community implements Stalinist policies, Maoist policies, authoritarian socialist policies, and seeing it is disrespectful not only to the Russian people, it is disrespectful to the millions who have died to authoritarian socialism. It is disrespectful to the varying people who had to escape socialism and authoritarianism. It is very disrespectful to the millions of German and Polish women and children who were raped in World War II. It is very disrespectful to the history of Russia. It is very disrespectful to the history of Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, and whatever the other 15 republics are in the Soviet Union. It is very disrespectful to those in the Eastern Bloc. It is very disrespectful to those in Asia. It is a pain that we even have to have this discussion, that you shouldn't be supporting authoritarianism, even if it's the socialist ideology that you want to implement. And I see so many people defend Stalin. I see so many people defend Mao Zedong. I see so many people defend Kim Il-sung so valiantly, so fiercely. And seeing that, it hurts. It hurts me as a socialist micronationalist. It hurts me as someone who studied history for a good 6 or 7 or 8 years now. It hurts me as someone who specializes in political theory, and it hurts me as someone who is a socialist micronationalist. I have had to struggle with the domino effect of being labeled as the cringy socialist micronationalist because everyone thinks I'm a Stalinist, when the exact opposite is true. I hate large government. I think the government can go to hell, pardon my language. And having that around you as a micronationalist is damaging. Being educated properly, whether you think it's capitalist lies or not, or you think it's lies of the West or lies of the East, you have to be educated in both senses of the matter in order to enact in successful micronationalism, in order to success in modern-day politics. Education is key to successful democracy, it is key to successful leadership, and it is key to a successful diplomatic, cultural, and ideological effort.
I'd like to add one thing about the authoritarianism you said about, and about what the last thing you said about what did you say last thing? I literally just forgot, but about authoritarianism. I disagree about you about that, because first of all, there are so many conditions you have to first of all know about. Like, say, if the authoritarian person is, say, just, if they're just, they'll do it justly, they're gonna do it good, they're gonna have it everything good. And say take for example my own micronation, and if you read the constitution, you would have seen like so many benefiting points to not only the citizens but for the entire mental health of the people, and for the physicality of people, and for the integrity of the people. And not only, but this will also benefit the other people that is outside of the micronation. And I'd like to add that.
So I know what you're saying, and I want to add very quickly because I think I might have said something wrong. Micronational authoritarianism is not always bad. I'd be a big hypocrite if I said all of micronational authoritarianism is bad. I'm in power for life. The only time I can be removed is if I'm impeached or if I die. So,
Cough, 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 cough.
Cough, 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 cough. I can't speak against micronational authoritarianism because I'd be a hypocrite. Not all micronational authoritarianism is bad. It can benefit so many people, and it can be so stable. What I was more referencing was the disrespect that some authoritarians in the community can enact upon. And libertarians do the same thing. Authoritarians and libertarians, they both do the same thing. They enact in the same thing. So it's not just limited to authoritarianism. It's expansive. It goes around the political spectrum. You need to be educated in what you're doing before you do it, so you avoid disrespect of people you don't know of or you don't understand. And bringing up the Marxist-Leninist authoritarianism in the community, I mentioned disrespect for authoritarian socialism because that in the community, many micronationalists praise Stalin. Stalin killed many people. Many people praise Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong killed many people in the Great Leap Forward. Many people praise Kim Il-sung, but Kim Il-sung enacted in purges and so on and so forth. You can argue with me the history and the politics of it, but at the end of the day, those people died. You have to keep in mind that you need to be respectful with what you do. Not all authoritarianism enacts in the community, and not all authoritarianism is bad. So I just wanted to clarify that if that's what anybody was thinking. I don't know if I just worded it differently or part of building identity is having respect for the identity that you're building.
And it's also a case of, if you're going to take on even an aspect of an ideology or a methodology within an ideology, educate yourself.
Oh yeah,
Educate yourself on the person or persons who founded that methodology or ideology, what the policies you're considering taking on in your own nation, what did they do in action? Like, there was policies within many authoritarian governments, both sides of the spectrum, that murdered millions. That as just an example.
Yeah, just murdered millions. Many policies that destroyed the lives of millions of families. Hopping back to the Berlin Wall as an example of left-wing authoritarianism, and then we can hop to the right side of the political spectrum and point at the Holocaust. We can point at the deportation of the Jewish people. We can point at the Einsatzgruppen slaughtering many Jewish families in the East. For the right political spectrum, we can go back to the left and we can look at the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989. And you have to keep in mind what you're doing and what you're saying for your micronation to succeed. And you have to be respectful of what you're doing, and you have to be knowledgeable of what you're doing as well.
I mean, the thing is, well, you know where I'm from. The situation about my country. I'm from Georgia as a country, and
Mm-hmm.
you know the situation that has happened here. We had so many problems, not only during the times of USSR, even after dissolving.
Oh yeah.
Even after we got out, everything was hell. Everything is still hell today. Everything's so bad right here. You have no idea. First of all, how many people's mentality has changed. How many people are suffering mentally, and how many people are suffering physically. There are so many people in poverty still in Georgia, in Russia, every USSR nation that has everyone that was part of the USSR is in poverty and is in danger, like serious danger. I don't know how else to express this.
It is so undercovered in the West. And I know this is devolving into politics, but I just want to cover really quickly. I want to start with, I will never, in my entire time of living, and I will live for 70 years, understand the pain that many Russians, Kazakhs, and Georgians, Tajiks, whatever other 15 republics there are, because I'm not going to name them all at the top of my head, I'm never ever in my lifetime going to understand the economic suffering, the social change, and the collapse that the fall of the USSR caused. And people who are ignorant of that, I don't understand why. I don't understand how people can go upon saying, oh, this was good, this authoritarian policy was good, but it killed millions of people. I've never been able to comprehend that in my life.
So let me explain about that. So either they're completely ignoring it purposefully, or they know it, or they don't know it. I don't know. But the thing is, they are either too stupid to look up the history that has happened with either wing of the political ideology. And not only was it the right wing that destroyed countries, it's also the left wing that has destroyed the countries.
Exactly. That's right.
Take a look at USA, how it is today. People want to protest. People are protesting. Well, I don't know how to say this, but the thing is, the protests has been getting so wild. People are getting killed during protests, and they're still calling it peaceful protests. And I don't get anything about the USA. I don't get anything about the West. Everything's kind of getting stupid there, and not only in the West, but also in the East, and specifically Europe. Europe is kind of the East, but I mean they're becoming Western right now, and it's been a thing for I don't know, years, decades. Maybe.
Yeah, 32, maybe 32 years now?
32 years right now, yes. Exactly. And the westernization of Europe is not only so bad, but take a look at the West. You know what I mean, right? And then here's the thing. They're trying to westernize every Eastern country. And they take a look at the relation between Africa and China. They're trying to kind of easternize Africa, and the West is trying to westernize Europe. They're trying to westernize who is close to Europe, like say Georgia, like say Ukraine, Finland. I don't know. They're trying to westernize countries that have say dignity, tradition, culture.
Yeah.
I mean, no offense. I don't mean any offense, but the thing is, what I'm trying to say is, we need to keep our heads up, because we have to defend our own traditions. We have to defend our own culture. We have to defend our own dignity. We have to defend our own honor within our country, and then to the world. But the first thing is, you have to defend it. Defend the dignity for the love of God. You have to keep your identity. There is no other way you can live. You have to keep your identity with your culture, with your language, with your motherland, etc. You have to keep your identity and individuality.
Yeah. I mean, that's all I got for that. Other than, we just got to be mindful of what we're doing. So, would anyone else want to say anything?
I was going to say, before the topic veered a little bit, another thing to remember is either extreme of the spectrum causes death and destruction.
Yeah.
Either extreme.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's fine, because this topic, our current discussion, actually is a great lead-in for my discussion. So...
Yeah, actually, so without further ado, unless Laura wants to hop on her own account first, I'm actually going to hand the floor to Laura because I don't need the floor anymore. So, Laura, if you want to start your talk on macronational politics, micronational politics, you're free to go. Just be mindful of what you say. I know who you are. So, and that's no offense to you. I mean, like, just be mindful of what you say. I say that to everybody. So, and yeah, I think you're good to go. So, the floor is yours, Laura.
1 second.
Okay.
There we go. Now things have been shifted over. As I was saying, this basically is a perfect lead-in. Yes, I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the micronational politics and macronational, how it all kind of relates. But one of the biggest things that I've been observing throughout this discussion is that macronations fail. Now, some of you may not know me. I am Queen and High Empress Laura from Hrafnarfjall. Along with my husband, we co-founded Hrafnarfjall. Basically, 5 years ago now? Just over? When...
We've just come out of our 5th birthday.
Yeah, when effectively King Thomas and I were discussing, well, America and the state of America presently, and how angry it was making me, and that I really had to have an outlet for it somehow. I had to be able to make a change, and Hrafnarfjall was it.
Yeah, I turned around and introduced the concept of micronationalism because I've been involved in varying parts of micronationalism since I was 9. I'm now 28, so...
So, really, my goal for this is as a facilitated discussion. I would like us all to kind of think about macronations and the ways in which they fail, and some of the key points that I would like people to keep in mind is, what are the functions of a government? What is it that a government is supposed to provide? And why is it that they're failing? That's a big question we all need to be asking ourselves. So, I'd like to hear from y'all. What do you think?
So, I guess the first question is... Wait, I'm sorry, can you just repeat? I'm so sorry, can you repeat the questions?
Sure. So basically, I'm wondering, want to hear from y'all what your thoughts are on why these macronations are failing their people, and what is it they're supposed to be providing to their people.
So I think it starts at a... That's a really good question, because I don't know if there's a... It depends on the situation, because if you look at America, for example, there was a gigantic social shift. So the liberals are more progressive, and when it comes to progressivism, the social climate tends to change. And the time that the social climate has changed, many Republicans and conservatives have fought us every way. They have made it their entire goal to reverse all change. For example, the recent, hate to bring up a touchy subject, and just giving a quick warning, we will not be discussing this topic in detail for reasons. The overturning of Roe v. Wade, a very progressive Supreme Court decision, as an example of overturning progressive ideology. Conservatives in the United States fear the change. They fear that we are right in a way, because the United States is no longer the greatest country on the earth. It is no longer a country where everyone is free. It is no longer a country where you seek refuge if you are struggling in your home country. It is no longer a welcoming environment, and it has now lost its purpose of liberty and the pursuit of happiness. In the past 50, 60 years post-World War II, the United States has participated in direct acts of imperialism across the entire planet. South America instilling dictators in various South American governments in order to avoid having a socialist government in its back door, directly being involved in European politics, directly being involved in a head-to-head battle with the Soviet Union. Of course, not mentioning the Soviet Union also engaged in some forms of imperialism. The United States has dedicated itself to interventionism and world intervention, and when conservatives hear that we have been committing crimes of imperialism and we have lost our status as the greatest country in the world, conservatives don't want to hear it, and they will do everything they can to preserve whatever is left so that we can still call it the greatest country on earth without progressing forward and accepting that we need to change. The political climate of the United States is very tense. It has been tense for 9 years. And ever since the election of Donald Trump, it has exploded in political ideology, political radicalization. Ever since COVID-19 hit, we are seeing a resurgence in political radicalism, similar to the Great Depression. And as the world economies begin to plunder, we will see a return in political radicalism of both sides. It really depends on the situation in the country to get that answer. And it also depends on how the nation itself is enacting upon the failures.
Yes, and I'm going to actually expand and take the higher view from that really drilled down and in-depth answer. So, from any viewpoint, if you're looking pretty much at history, in a lot of these situations, what you have is a complete divide in ideology. You have cultures basically start to rip each other apart, which is exactly what we see happening here. And what happens is that internal strife winds up breaking down. Now, with the U.S. in particular, we're kind of going the way Rome did. We're overexpanding, which contributed to this particular issue. But that's you've got the left and right. You have black and white, basically, and you can find those kinds of divides throughout everything. There's a rift, a division of ideology, and a loss of culture.
I think one of the bigger risks of globalization of the United States and the neoliberal go away, Siri. The expansion of the neoliberal ideology and the expansion of globalism is that we are now stretching ourselves too thin, and we, as, dare I say, a non-empire empire, we are facing social struggles and internal struggles, and as Laura mentioned, we are going a path similar that Rome did. It's going to take time, and it is going to take many events for this to actually occur, but the United States is on a path of complete collapse.
Yes, and the point of collapse is when a government is no longer able to provide a function for its people. Basically, if you step back, and I asked the initial question, what is it that a government is supposed to do? What is the function of government overall? And why do we need government? And to me, I purport that that's several. But its overall goal is to look out for its citizens and its people, to take care of their well-being and make sure that they can also do that for themselves. They have food. They have shelter. They have access to basically the absolute basic needs one has to survive, and that includes healthcare and education. It also includes safety, security, infrastructure, and if you're not meeting those, then as a government you have failed. And that is what we see right now, in my opinion, what's going on. We see in each of these cases, these internal strifes getting so strong that a government is no longer meeting these key functions of a government, and then I am left to ask, why do we have a government? If we can no longer see that being successful, if they're no longer performing a function, what's the point?
So, to quote a specific individual, when he was, fuck, I'm just gonna say who it is. To quote Kim Il Sung, "My God is the people," and that is a policy that I have forever endured in my heart. It is a policy of which I have implemented in Adonia. It's a policy of which it should be the basis of government. And what government is failing to do at the moment is proper serving of the people. And this mainly devolves at ideological stance. Whatever you stand on economically in the United States, I'm not going to talk about the rest of the world. I am more educated in the United States, and I'm more educated in probably Western and Eastern Europe, but I'm going to stick to the United States for my own benefactor. In the United States, I see a common trend of privatization. I see a common trend of destruction of culture. I see a common trend of a threat to people's civil liberties. And one of the bases of government should be much rather a less concentrated center of power. I think the United States government has too much power in its hands. It is we consider ourselves, it's not considered by many other people, one of the best countries in the world, apparently. We consider ourselves the world police, that we need to serve the people of the world. We need to intervene in everything. There could be a civil war in Africa, and the US is like, knock, knock, the United States. You need to cool the hell down. Or in other cases, instilling dictators in South and Central America, the United States has failed to realize that the God isn't the biblical writing, the God is the people themselves. They are the defining destiny writers. They are the people who write the destiny of the entire nation. They are the people who write the history. They write the culture. They write the language. Everything always starts at the base concept known as the collective masses, the people themselves. And what government is failing at is concentrated authoritarianism, that the government is oppressing its people, and it is continually failing to properly acknowledge that the true God of politics and the true God of national standard is mankind itself. It isn't Jesus, it isn't Allah, it isn't Biden, it isn't Trump, it isn't the Republican Party, it isn't the Democratic Party, it isn't the Communist Party of the United States, it isn't anything else except the people themselves. And many governments fail to realize how vital it is to have public support. And
Yes, because just to interject a moment here, yes, that's exactly the point. They forget that basically the power the government has derives from the people. Without the people, the government has absolutely nothing. But also, the point is that we at this point have so many divided ideologies about what that is, what that means, what the government should be doing, that even the government's confused. So, like, they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. We don't know, as a collective, what we want the government to be doing. So the government is basically capitalizing on that, turning us against each other so it can continue to serve its own means. And that is where we're having the issues.
I think it starts at the central. I think you're right. I think you're right that the collective as a whole doesn't know and cannot, and I will emphasize this right away, will probably ever be able to identify and agree upon how a government should serve its people. In the United States, however, we have had many instances where bipartisan agreements have occurred, and have had many moments where both parties have said, screw differences, we're the same. And in reality, they are the same. They don't want to admit it. They're both equally as horrible as each other. They are both equally as disgusting as each other, and that's how it always will be. They do capitalize off of mass confusion. Government will always profit off of mass confusion, and that is how these nations have worked for many, 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 many years. And it's very sad to hear.
Yeah, and that's pretty much exactly the point here. Because when we start in all this infighting and basically arguing among each other, first of all, we can't send the proper message that we need to be sending. Like, hey, look, this is what we want. And it's hard too, because this whole multiple ideas, I mean, that's going to be no matter where you are in any group of people. No two people are going to see anything the same. So, like, what do you do? And in this case, if you look at the United States, and it's basically over the last, 200 and some odd years, almost 300, it's rapidly expanded.
Yeah.
And it's failed to kind of keep its infrastructure and its people on the same page, maintaining a sense of unity and nationality, like for instance, in Great Britain, which I see as more successful. And I believe a lot of that has to do with the fact that, in Great Britain, it's smaller.
Not just that, we've had several hundred more years to develop that cohesiveness.
Mm-hmm. But even though, finally, the people had to basically go, no, look, you may be the king, but you're answerable to us, ultimately. Yeah, the Magna Carta, which basically was a lot of the initial proviso for the United States. Yeah. And then we finally said, hey, look, we're tired of your bullshit, so excuse the French, but yeah. We're not going to be putting up with that anymore. We're going to do our own thing. So, I mean, the United States here particularly has a history of not putting up with this sort of tyranny. And why...
Yeah, we're enacting it on ourselves.
Yep, so why are we putting up with it now? You know?
I think a big part of that is people are uneducated. People are confused. Oh, that scared me. Okay, sorry. I was just not reacting. I was reacting to something. So people are confused. People are uneducated. You see it in many U.S. political situations, many debates that I've watched. You know, apparently liberalism is socialism, even though liberals believe in privatization and globalization. So whatever, I guess, right? Like that, but that's communism, guys. Communism is liberalism.
That's something I've noticed, at least in US politics.
Yeah.
They say liberalism is left-wing. No, classical liberalism is centre-right.
Yeah. We've skewed that particular political spectrum here.
But anyway.
If you go to Europe and you tell someone that if someone tells you they're liberal and you're like, oh, you're a socialist, they're gonna laugh in your fucking face. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
Don't. Pardon my language, but don't do that. You know, like you can't. The political system in the U.S. and then you go to Europe, they're so different. Like what we consider a socialist, you go to Europe is a moderate, and that's like, wow, really?
Yep. What Americans call socialists is what most Europeans regard as moderate centre-left.
And
yeah.
Here's another point I'd really like to kind of hit upon that you mentioned briefly, and it's this overall lack of education. America education system is basically downsliding at a scale that is just unprecedented, and it's embarrassing. Americans traveling abroad are notorious for being loudmouthed, ignorant, rude, uncultured people.
I think we're getting off topic a little bit.
Our education system, which is supposed to be improving the populace, is instead fostering into this whole systematic divide. And I think a large part of, like I said, the function of government is to provide for the education of its people, because if you provide the education for your population, you're only going to better the entire system as a whole. You're going to enable the populace to come up with these brilliant ideas and to effectively govern better. They're going to be able to come up with these ideas, watch what the government's doing, and form a valued and informed opinion about that, to be able to help kind of tell the government, hey, look, this is where we need to be going here. Instead of all this rule by the government, because the government always knows best. But America basically has been founded on that particular principle that, nah, you can't leave it up to the, average Joe. They don't know anything. But anywhere else in like Europe and Scandinavia, their education system's like far superior. And I think that helps them out inordinately. They're not relying upon money to actually get educated. So you have this divide being fostered here because of that, because the rich get the education to be richer, to be more in control, to have more of the power, and basically to pay off the government.
The richer get rich, and the poorer get poor.
And America's ruled by the almighty dollar. So let's be honest, who do they want to have the education? They don't want the ignorant poor.
So there is. I'm sorry I have to break it, but so basically, what I think is happening is that America has changed a lot. There are children. There are so many people who have changed. Now, first of all, this is because of the way of thinking, the way of understanding they have. It's really weird if you look at it. First of all, their language, the language, American English, is pretty stupid. Let's say. I'm sorry, but
no, it is. It is.
No reason to apologise. I call it. Sorry, I was going to say I call American English, and excuse my language, I call it a bastardized version of its mother language.
So my point is that the language, I mean, like the dialect, whatever it's called, American English is way too simplified, first of all, and that changed the understanding of the people in America, in the United States of America, I mean, and it has changed way too many people who have learned the American English, and the oversimplification of things made way to very, very bad things, like say very bad faith, extreme faith, and so many other things that played a factor into the. Let's say I'm not gonna put this. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I'm gonna say that people have been dumbed. Let's say people have been stupefied because of the simplification of the language and because of their own understandings they made.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's basically just the fault of the people that they made their own mentality and tried to understand way too many things on their own. And not only, but they're trying to pretty much do everything else but learn.
That's because we can't rely upon the institutions from which we're supposed to be learning here.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's a massive problem.
It is.
Like you guys have, not you guys. I mean the U.S. has way too many businesses. They have way too many things, and well, they could have supported the education system. They could have supported the government in so many ways, except taxes. There are so many ways you could do everything. And
America is over privatized.
they just paint it as, oh, you cannot do anything, and then you become a nihilist. You become stupid in way too many ways.
We become complacent and accept the way things are as the way they should be.
I do want to
Exactly.
mention with the dumbed down language part of that. First off, that was very based. Secondly, you see a common trend of Americans believing in a variety of conspiracy theories. One I've heard a lot about recently from one of my more conservative-leaning ex-coworkers was the Great Reset. Everyone wants to implant chips in you. Everyone wants to control your mind through technology. And if we don't take on globalization, it'll be over. We're all gonna die, and we're all gonna be robots with chips on our heads. And
Alright,
it's like,
so I have to make a point about that. I've heard that conspiracy myself. First of all, I've been in groups that discuss that conspiracy theory, and well, there are too many views about Great Reset. First of all, the one right thing about the Great Reset is that it's gonna be globalist. Yeah. The second thing that's right about the Great Reset is it's not gonna be completely good. It's gonna pretty much ruin uniqueness, identity, individualism, and there are way too many things in conspiracy theories. You have to sometimes consider in a different way, different angle, and sometimes some of them will turn out correct. Some of them will be extremely, say, illogical, but somehow they just end up true.
Well, yeah.
Like, I mean like way too many conspiracy groups myself as an operation. And
I love
don't get me
conspiracy
wrong.
theories. I love conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
They're
They're
great.
Don't get
entertaining.
me wrong, but I mean like way too many conspiracy groups, and it's a part of operation. It's an intel operation that I'm doing by my own self. And the thing I found out most is that they argue more about safety of the people. There is no safety, they say, and some part of it is true. I mean, take a look at internet security. Take a look at social medias you're using, like say Discord. You know what happens in Discord at all? Do you know what the deals are on Discord? First of all, the thing is that 40% of Discord is owned by China, Tencent, and all the data gets transferred to China. The 40% of the share, and this is very dangerous. First of
Yeah.
all, for many people, and this it's because of a new law China implemented right after buying Discord, and you have the deal is that the companies that collect foreign data have to transfer the data to the Chinese government, and this is extremely dangerous. There is not going to be only proof of leaked documents and everything that is like government secret or maybe people's privacy, etc. Everything is going to be on the Chinese government's database, and this is going to endanger the whole world. And this is one thing that is true. And I know it's this the sooner we delete Discord, it's going to be better.
An interesting point. But one I'd like to make kind of a tie-in is that with the whole, you have all these conspiracy theories which are enhanced by the lack of education and lack of ability to think critically, because that's just not a skill taught. And what we have then is fear. You have a populace which is afraid, which then turns to the government to protect it.
So the thing is that I think it's also the lack of education, but there are some certain groups that have gone so far into like actually leaking massive like I don't know how to say this, but they have leaked confidential documents.
Oh wow.
And there are way too many things I cannot discuss, but some of them I can discuss because some footages are still up and some proofs of it. So there is this one conspiracy I've been hearing the most about in the groups, and it's about 9/11, and the footage they sent the most is when CNN reporter was near the Pentagon, and he was saying that there was no plane bits at all. He was near the Pentagon. He neared the tower. He neared the building, and he went and saw like only small bits. He saw only small bits, and he reported on the CNN news that there was no plane bits whatsoever, and that is the only footage that is like shared around multiple times, and it's the footage has never aired ever again, and it was recorded. It was somehow like recorded. Someone recorded it, and well, maybe the company itself, the CNN, and maybe some ex-employee leaked the tape. Who knows? But the fact is that it has been leaked, and
Mm-hmm.
some documents regarding 9/11 is still being leaked today, and the signatures, everything is kind of trying to get verified
Well,
by the groups. So yeah, that's
Okay.
the point is that
we'll
some
have like
conspiracy
another.
theories
I
can
think
turn
we
out
need another
true.
topic here to discuss conspiracy theories, but we're kind of getting a little bit
I'm sorry about
off
that, yeah.
topic right now. So let's redirect, get back on track here about discussing how this kind of all is influenced by the government, how it is that such macro governments are beginning to kind of see the cracks forming, and why we as micronationalists actually succeed where they fail. And I think
We succeed where we fail because we know our own issues.
exactly.
Like
Exactly.
you go at higher levels of government and they don't know the local level of things. So when you are taking on local issues yourself, the solution is a lot easier to implement for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in Adonia, for example, everybody knows this at this point. I am not a fan of neoliberalism. I hate neoliberalism. Pain in the. So, when I